Well, hi there and welcome to the At Home with Architects webinar series presented by Brickworks Building Products. My name is Eve Castle. I'm the National Business Development Manager for Brickworks. It's my great pleasure on behalf of our team right across the country to welcome you and to obviously thank you for joining us. Very special welcome to Hannah of Tribe Studio in Sydney. We're very grateful that Hannah's joining us tonight, and we're very much looking forward to her presentation in just a few moments' time. If you are joining us for a webinar for the first time, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A function, and Hannah's been gracious enough to welcome questions throughout the night. So please, we encourage you to place your questions there, and we'll come back and address those with Hannah at the conclusion of her presentation. At this time, I'd just like to mention a few other events we have coming up. I'll just quickly share my screen and mention firstly the Archiflix events. We've been delighted to partner with Archiflix in the online movie festival, which is occurring on Friday nights during May. This Friday night, there's a first time Australian screening of Australian architecture, Universal Principles. So this was a film originally created for an exhibition at the Mori Gallery in Japan. And the film will cover a fabulous range of both Australian architects and their projects. So if you'd like to register for that one, please head along to archiflix.com.au. The tickets are free. And with all of the feature films, they'll be followed by an encore showing, but you certainly don't need to stay on for both. You can pick or choose which one you'd like to enjoy. Finally, our CPD events, we're continuing to offer those during May, and we'll release our June schedule shortly also. There's some new topics being offered this month. If you've missed an invitation and you'd like to be part of that learning, you can jump on the Brickworks website, head to the events page, and you'll be able to register from there. Finally, we know the way that we are working and certainly the way that we're doing business is changing, and we'd love to hear from you on any ways that we can support you as we go through these changes. If you're able to stay online, just very quickly after the presentation tonight, there'll be a short survey. We'd love to hear your views on the types of content and again, the ways that we can support you during this period. So with that, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Nathan Blackwell. Nathan's our New South Wales Business Development Manager, and Nathan's been in the privileged position of getting to work with Hannah on projects over the last few years, and Nathan will give a personal introduction. We'll be back with some questions later. Please enjoy.
Thanks, Eve. So yeah, just Hannah Tribe is obviously our speaker tonight. So Hannah is the founder and principal of Tribe Studio Architects. Hannah has built the practice from the beginning, which I think was 2003 she started. She's been recognised for design excellence in its built and conceptual work in residential and urban design, education, installation and interiors. The practice currently has a team of 15 architects working on projects in Australia and internationally. Hannah was educated at the University of Sydney. She was a graduated first class honours and the university medal. She's also taught at the University of Sydney, UTS and UNSW. She's tutored in design and lectured in design and design communications. She's sat on the New South Wales Chapter Council of the Australian Institute of Architects. She's been invited as a juror on award panels, including the Institute Awards and the IDEA Awards and the 2020 Houses Awards. She's also won a few of those awards as well, which I'm sure she'll go into, and probably the most prestigious Think Brick Award a few years ago that she won. Hannah's also a mother of two, a very keen painter from what I've heard. And I think very much an inspiration to not just female, young female architects or designers that are looking to sort of get ahead in the industry, but definitely a broader sort of community. And I think she's one of the, fewer architects that is really recognised outside of the architectural community as well, and is very much someone that I know personally is one of my closest people that I love to deal with, and I love her work and how she pushes things to the limit, and is a big fan of brick as well. So which is always great. But so please welcome Hannah, and hope you enjoy. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Nathan. What a lovely warm welcome. Gosh, this is awfully weird speaking into the void. I can see that there are 231 participants here already. So hello to all of you. I wish I could make eye contact and share a nice drink with you at Brickworks. They're always such a great supporter of architectural culture and us all getting together, and we certainly enjoy working with them too. So I'm going to share my screen. And I assume, thank you, Eve, as well. Sorry, I didn't mention you. I assume that Eve or Nathan will give me a hoy if it stops working. We've had a few technical glitches today. But I was really going to start with a complaint that I found it terribly difficult to put this talk together and to think about what it means to be domesticated or domesticity in the time of COVID-19 and how much the world's changing. Our work at Tribe is between 50 and 70% domestic. We do mainly houses, and we're obsessed with the domestic, both on our individual projects, but we're also interested in how houses contribute to the city as a whole and to the public domain. We've been part of the pompous chorus of architects deriding this suburban house type. Oh no, there we are. With its excess space, with lots of extra rooms, because it's brought the gym into the home, it's brought the office into the home, it's brought the school into the home, and the cinema into the home. And yet here we are all having to do all of that during COVID-19. My career began in a time with a very different spirit. It was, I started working during the Sydney Olympics, when public spaces had a very different character to how they have now. It was boom time building, optimism, and there was an incredible triumph of public life over the private. We all went out rather than staying at home. And yet today, the end of this moment in my career is marked by the fires, by kind of raging and galloping climate crisis, and by COVID-19. And I wonder, can anything be the same? Are we at the end of an era when public spaces can look like this? And it's a really strange feeling to be operating in this space. I mean, we want to help, we all want to do something to support the sick, to support the frontline workers. And the best way that we can do that is to stay at home and actually be domesticated. We've had to domesticate our work lives, we've domesticated school, we've domesticated the gym, we've domesticated our social lives. We're all cooking more, we're not flogging ourselves with additional activities and appointments, and we're able to do a load of washing in the middle of a workday. This is my fabulous team at Tribe, only 12 of us at the moment. Zoom's collapsed the public and the private in the work and the home space. I've seen clients and their cats have walked across the keyboard in a meeting, and consultants who've had to wrestle naked toddlers. And we've seen the inside of people's bedrooms. So while we're having this like public entree into the private life of the home, our public spaces look like this. They look haunted and ghosting. So it feels really weird to talk about the domestic work that we made in a time of higher optimism when homes didn't have to be the public domain that they have to be right now. Our concerns with the domestic have largely been concerned around architecture and also the division and hierarchy of domestic labour within the home. So when I say that, I mean typical architectural concerns about site materiality and construction and so on, but we're really interested in the change in the domestic sphere. So just in brief, in the 1880s, we saw the cult of the domestic rise. So with more affluence in the middle classes, you have domestics or servants who do the labour, and suddenly women can be godly stitchers and looker after of children. So homemaking and child rearing was acquainted with godliness. If we fast forward to the post-World War II era, we have a second cult of the domestic, where women were encouraged by a great big propaganda push and a marketing effort to get out of the workplace and back into the kitchen, although I'm not sure how she's going to bend over and get that roast out wearing that corset. In this fabulous book, Women in the Making of the Modern Home, Alice Friedman argues that it was the clients of the moderns, the single female clients and the lesbian clients, who briefed the great modern architects to make a different kind of house. They were omitting formal dining spaces where men presided as the head of the table. They were treating cooking as a sociable task or a leisure task, and they were deformalizing parenting, including having children in public spaces, not in a seen but not heard kind of way. So in Tribe's Olympics to COVID era, we've been watching this idea of the domestic develop. In conservative circles in the men's movement, you see a resistance to the sharing of domestic labour between the genders, and lots of really baffling jokes about how if a man, you know, can't clean up his crap or feed himself, he's somehow less attractive. You see things like this Telegraph article, why domesticated men can never be attractive, because men with dirty clothes are obviously sexier. Or these two, I don't know which one of these two cartoons is stranger or what they're trying to say, but I don't think either of them are good. Happily, that's not my experience of men in the domestic realm, in the work realm, or anywhere else, COVID or before. In this book, Annabelle Crabb looks at the patterns in the division of mental and physical labour in the home, arguing that men are getting more out of being engaged in the domestic realm, in family life and the domestic, and women need to offload a bunch of the work that they've historically done. And women seem to suffer from all that propaganda and a feeling that having a clean home and an orderly domestic sphere is a measure of a woman's goodness or her worth. So what we see at our work is much more 50-50 domestic labour divided between our clients. So our clients are briefing us where all genders are much more involved in child rearing and cooking. But also in our work life, we're seeing parent staff work more flexibly and contributing more equally to home labour. And we hope that this change in work and home that we've seen through the COVID-19 stage, these lessons will really kickstart us into really putting our money where our mouths are for flexible workplaces. And in doing so, we'll drill into more deeply what the domestic really means, and we'll go on meaning. So what will the next big shift mean? What does it mean for design? What does it mean for architecture? Will we continue to work from home and ask our homes to be so much more than we have previously? I've done a bit of a vox pop on some previous clients to see how they're going, and almost universally they're enjoying the time in the home, the family time, family meals, cooking together, washing up together. They're enjoying not being overscheduled with kids' sport and running multiple social lives. And they've really spread out into their homes. So rooms that weren't really used before have been set up as home offices or school rooms, or just places to escape from the rest of the family. So will we continue to lean into this deformalization of work with this blurring of home and work? Will my home, for instance, have to continue to support 4 very loud Zoom meetings simultaneously at the same time? And what will this mean spatially for the design of houses? So our houses have always been concerned with the domestic, with work, leisure and play of the home and with family. Houses are special. They're not places you visit for a single function like worship in a church or schooling in a school. They're the backdrops for our relationships, for love, for grief, for socializing and for solitude. Our houses really see us. I love this poem by Denise Levertov. It's a letter to a bridegroom asking if he can endure life with the 2 sides of his woman, the comfy domestic version and the charismatic one who's out in the world. It starts, it's the one in homespun you hunger for when you are lonesome. The one in crazy feathers dragging opal chains in dust wearies you. After all of this is over, will we simplify? Will we indulge the homespun more? Will we enjoy simpler things? Or will our clients start asking for bigger houses again? A room for the homespun, a room for the crazy feathers. Does putting our opal chains away just mean we need more storage? So in light of all those questions, I'm just going to present a really simple portfolio review of some residential work we've done. And I've peppered it with some insights from our clients about these unprecedented times. I've also done a COVID-19 map of the projects I'm talking about. So largely based in Sydney, a few on the outskirts, and a real cluster in the eastern suburbs. The first project is How So Young. This is the one that Nathan mentioned, the big brickwork on. Thank you very much. It's in leafy Roseville, in a place of terracotta roofs under big canopy of trees. It's got a kind of a funny subdivision plan. But the area is really characterized by these small bungalows sitting under a canopy of leaves. And in order to keep that, we need to keep the height of the house low and also the footprint of the house small. Here's some shots from around the neighborhood. So some beautifully constructed, quaint bungalows with articulated roof forms, low rise, lots of lichen and charmingness. This was the house we began with. Here it is on its funny site. We trimmed its back off to reduce its overall footprint and provide canopy for the trees. Here it was at the back of the house. There's where we sliced through the house, and here it is now. So the back gable's treated as a kind of call and response to the front elevation, where we had the brick sunburst on the front. We've got the cheeky gables on the back. That's my call and response diagram. Such that from the public domain, the house makes a contribution to this kind of suburban language of brick and tile roofs, but it still is unapologetically contemporary, and it gives you a kind of feeling of suburban uncanny. So it's a subtle and polite urban design response, this house, not visible from the street elevation. From the rear elevation, it peeks through the other gables. But what about the cultural response, or why is this interesting domestically? So this is a house that actually celebrates our changing cultural values, our relationship with domestic work, our relationship with landscape and our leisure. And at the same time, it's a celebration of the modesty, craftsmanship and public domain focus of the past. So here's the back view. This is this idea about the relationship with the garden, and that garden's all completely overrun with our clients' beautiful homegrown vegetables now. So the house presents its best face to the street. It's well crafted, it's whimsically detailed, it's expensive to build. But around the back again, here we see the unpoetic side. It houses the domestic work, the meal preparation, the washing. The house's engine rooms of kitchen and laundry are woefully second or third rate in their architectural expression. It's utilitarian, it's ungracious. Its relationship with the garden is crude. It's the home and the workspace of women, and it's not valued. Luckily, our values have changed. So the new alterations and additions represent this about face in our culture and our domestic values. Work within the home is now shared by men and women and children. Labour-saving devices have converted the drudgery of meal preparation into recreation, leisure, and often a competitive sport. The feminine workspaces of the house have been completely degendered and opened up and reassigned to first-class socialisation and recreation. On a similar front, it's clear to see that during the creation of the original 1930s bungalow, a huge amount of importance was put on putting your best face forward to the street, impressing the neighbours, contributing a pleasing streetscape and a pleasing place to live. So the public contribution of the individual building was prized. And now, after the odds and ads, the house gives equal weight to its urban design contribution and to the garden and to its interiors. So it's this equalising of values, what we give to the public domain, what we hold in reserve for our individual space, our space of leisure, that represents how we now work as a society. The kitchen's a socialising space and a nourishing space, but when it all gets too messy and utilitarian, you can just hide it in the cupboard. Our clients sent some fantastic photos of the children using this space during COVID. So this space is also a game space, a workspace, competitive cooking space. This made me feel like a failure as a mother to see these kids making this beautiful fish dish on Mother's Day. And I don't know why he needs that amazing piece of engineering for that cake, but it's impressive. One of our favourite things about practising architecture in Australia is the egalitarian nature of the suburb. You can build in whatever style you like. And certainly this architect was building in a style that our heritage consultant called the ye olde English style. We've got this, the herringbone brick gables with the timber overlay, the brick sunburst. And at the rear, the program goes up to retain the existing footprint. And we've responding to the whimsicality of the original architect, we've created a room that's very specific to these people. So when the boys were little, this was for a little boy who liked to look at the garden. This was for a larger boy who liked to look at the sky. And this window frames the view of the beautiful trees in the back garden for our passionate gardener client, Susan. We drilled through the circulation spaces of the house, creating a house that's an invitation to the garden. The old rooms were restored and painted in jaunty colours. And here's how the boys are using them now. And the wet areas, we used vibrant colours to, in a response to the strategy of the period. We also designed some custom solid steel door hardware with marble inlays. Here are the handles in a blasted finish, and there are the decals. So to look at it more architecturally, here are the plans of the house. The front of the house is still very cellular with this open room at the back. We've got bedrooms wedged into the roof form of the upper floor. There it is in section. And there's our expressive tapestry of brickworks over the top. But I don't think we captured the real feeling of this house quite as well as our client Trevor did in his etch sketch rendition that he sent to us after they'd moved in. The next house is a house in Linfield, done at about the same time. Again, we've got a leafy North Shore suburban situation, big tree canopy, licheny roofs. Here's the original house. It's quite charming with its long, low lines, a kind of Frank Lloyd Wright light. The original plan was very simple, a little bit gnarly. The garden, north is to the top left-hand side of your screen. Our brief was to create a new master bed, robe, ensuite, laundry, study, and rumpus. And our project was to do that without demolishing the house and without pushing the roof form up any closer to the tree canopy. So we started with this original L form and we created this wonky arm on the edge of it, which houses the master bedroom, ensuite and robe. And there it is, its roof form slides in under the eave line of the original house and its brick and terracotta material reflects the original. It arcs into the garden, creating both a courtyard and a reflective surface to allow northern sun to bounce off that wall and back into the kitchen. The garden's very private and it feels like it owns that upper level of the garden. On the ground floor, we kind of hollowed out a new study, rumpus room and laundry, exposing the existing herringbone struts under the floor and connecting to the pool level of the garden. So there it is. We collaborated with Paul Bangay on the garden, creating these two levels and more formal courtyard veranda spaces and kind of blurring the place that old and new meet. There's the courtyard space, the brick wall in the garden and brick screening. And here's Bangay's garden in stepped terrace walls connecting that lower level to the new wedge of room. The original house we left largely intact, just staining the cypress pine floorboards black, but leaving the hardwood language and extending that into the new. Simple addition of a handrail extension and single skin brick wall enclosing that, that ensuite and using the single skin to express the relationship of light switch to lights. Again, we made some custom solid brass hardware in this case, including joinery pools and roseless knobs. And this pivoting and swiveling mirror in front of the brick screen in the ensuite. And there's the house nestling under its canopy of trees. And the front reinstating some of these brick walls and allowing it to be a long, lean, elegant old thing under its canopy of green. Moving into the inner city, here's a house in Darlinghurst. Darlinghurst, or all of South Sydney, is characterised by really strong north-south street connections, making blocks, and our site is at the centre of one of these blocks. It's connected by a little rabbit warren of lanes, and it's at the back of all those Victorian terraces you can see there. Here are the Victorian terraces. So they've been added to kind of ad hoc since the 60s when the area started to be gentrified. And also the hippies who moved in planted native trees, not realising that they'd grow to like 40 metres. So here's the one overshadowing or adjacent to our site. The back lane is also the front door to this old factory building, which was weirdly sited in the middle of a terrace block. And that's now been converted to luxury apartments, but this lane is still its front door. Here's our subject site. There it is there in the middle of this rabbit warren of back lanes and back fences. It was a 1930s electrical substation that was built here by the Municipal Council of Sydney to provide electricity to all these houses nearby. So it has a history of making a contribution to place. There it is before we started. It's a contributory item in a conservation area, but it doesn't, it's really just some charming brickwork and a sweet pediment. And there it is again, adjacent to the warehouse apartments. Somebody had had a go at it before. It was a single-storey office with a garage on the ground floor. And our brief was to shoehorn in as much space as we possibly could. So we went from 2 stories to 3 with 2 compressed stories, garage and room at the base, bedrooms in the middle and a very tall living space and a roof terrace on top. So the garage level before looked like that. And we put a new stair, which on the right-hand side of that plan on the east, that slices all the way through the building from sky to base. Garage at ground floor with a spare room and bathroom, 2 bedrooms above, kitchen, and returning up that stair to a roof terrace at the top with a pool. We were worried, it's a house for a couple and 2 dogs. We were worried the dogs wouldn't like the mesh stair, but they do. And you can see how it brings light all the way down to the front door from above. And there it is acting as a lantern. So it's kind of the porch light to the entry to those apartments and to the back door. So we hope still to make a public domain contribution through this house. As it once provided electricity, now it provides light. It sounds a bit cheesy when I say it like that. We made new openings in the solid brickwork walls and then filled them in with brick and steel screens. And we extruded the volume of the house up with solid glass bricks that create this beautiful refracted and reflected light that changes all the way through the day and gives you a really ephemeral sense of the top of the building, something solid becoming transparent. We inched open the space under this pediment so that we could fit a car into the ground floor. And the interior language is a modest meeting of industrial finishes and residential. The whole project is a celebration of light, of dappled light, of refracted light, of reflected light, and of the pinkish light that's bounced off of the existing brick fabric in the neighbourhood. And this stair in the light brings you up through this glazed crown, right up to the top of the stairs, where we've got some really robust steel detailing, and then out to the pool at the top. So I asked our clients if they'd changed how they live. So they're a couple living here, and they said, yes, the way we've used the house has definitely changed. We're using the outdoor space a lot more, which is, I feel really pleased to think about them sitting on that roof terrace, enjoying the beautiful weather in isolation. The second and third bedrooms have become dedicated workspaces for Chris and myself. So I think that's a huge luxury to be able to set up spaces like that, and I'm really pleased that these guys have that. We've also set up the garage as a home gym. we've found that having the spaces set up that way has allowed us to separate work and home really well, which I think is fantastic. And I'm really gratified that in 48 square meters of footprint, they can have a 2 home offices, a gym, an outdoor space and a pool, and be functioning really well. This is another Alts and Ads project in Queen's Park, near Centennial Park and Queen's Park. Again, strong north-south grid and rear lanes again. So this is a part of Sydney where council's really concerned about not affecting the street elevation, but don't seem to be concerned about the laneway elevations or that part of the public domain. And also, as property prices have increased, desirable areas like this are commanding, or clients are asking for much larger houses on smaller sites. So that sense of this being a real garden suburb is diminishing, and it's turning into a courtyard suburb. This is a context shot across the road. So it's a heritage conservation area, but council are quite hysterical about the few non-contributory items. So when we proposed a new house, they said, no way, Jose, you have to keep that heritage front facade and the front room. So we did that, but we've put a gigantic house on the back of it, a courtyard space, and then a new garage and secondary dwelling. So there's this really great densification that's happening in these areas. Secondary dwellings are quite common, but I think council's endeavours to retain the character of the place by retaining 10 metres of street frontage are probably misdirected. So instead of doing the second level that looks like it's landed from out of space on top of a little bungalow, we actually did a kind of telescoping series of matching gable ends. So while we don't normally go in for mimicry, we've given it a red hot shot here. And then in section, we've got multiple little telescoping shells inside the greater section as well. The front room is treated in a different colour palette to the rest of the house. The ground floor is made from bricks recycled from the demolition of the project. And there's a kind of richness and density to the programming of the ground floor. And because in these small sites we don't see much of the sky, we treated the volume of the section as a kind of cloudscape or something that was really muted. This is the kids' study that's behind bifold doors in the kitchen area. And there's that serene upper level space with the multiple roof forms, gable-shaped roof forms coming together. Side boundaries were treated really carefully for privacy in terms of window location. We also used fluted glass and screening for privacy and sun control. So I asked Sarah, our client, how she was coping. She's a health worker, she's studying, and she's homeschooling 2 kids. So have a look at this section and you'll see dotted below the main floor that there's a basement level there. She sent me this video of the basement with the text, basement, what happens when you can't supervise a child with a penchant for crafts? And then this second line, which I think, you know, a lot of us are relaxing in ISO, she said, I've secretly been longing for actual ISO, to be honest, which gave me pause to reflect. Moving on to a house in Paddington. This is a terrace house. We're really interested in terrace houses because of the that sophisticated repetition of figure and ground. So the repetition of the figure of the individual terrace house creates a really intriguing ground of urban room, which recalls the work of Agnes Martin for me. Here's the house. It's a big grand Victorian terrace. It had a carriageway, which is shown on the east there on the right-hand side. That had a 1980s job on it. The little house was in the 1980s, so we demolished that and retained the original Victorian. Here's a heritage sketch for council, nothing to see here. But the idea was that we continued the street wall to create another figure that creates the ground. The material language is a response to the original. So where we have zinc in the, slate roof in the original, we have zinc tiles here. Coursed render becomes off-form concrete, and wrought iron becomes a filigree layer of steel for privacy and security. during this process, I was called by, about this house, which was in Houses magazine, I was called by a Woollahra Council officer, and he said, can you enter this in the Woollahra Heritage Awards? And I was like, mate, you never would have approved that. And he said, fair enough, but if you've got something coming up, let me know. And we just did happen to have something coming up. So we actually, for this house, had the easiest council process I think we've ever had before, which was great. There it is from the front. The old part of the house remains largely intact, revealing some of its patina of age, and kind of careful insertions that match that idea of texture and layering. We've got holes through to the new part of the house, through to that side piece, through from the dining room to the new kitchen. So in the new addition is pantry kitchen, looking out to the existing pool beyond. A new master bedroom with window seat to the north, reading nook, ensuite bathroom that looks out into this beautiful jacaranda tree. We had a lot of fun with the existing and proposed detailing. And it gets quite playful, and here's this screen moving to and fro on the facade. Our client Tina is a homekeeper. She does the domestic labour of the house as her day job. And she said the experience of isolation with her adult son and husband working from home is just like having a couple of extra people in her office. I think she might need them to go through the training process. This is a house in Clovelly that's been on the books for a really long time. It's only just finished. It's up the hill from the beach with beautiful district and ocean views to the east. It's a long, thin site with its north-facing boundary looking into the sides of all these houses, but through a canopy of mature trees. So it's got beautiful access to sun, views to the east, and then an existing pool and elevated garden to the west. So like a lot of semis, the neighbour had already gone up in this kind of off-the-rack mode. And we went up like this by extending the line of the existing gable up to capture the northern sun into clerestory windows over. And I think this talks to a really interesting change. I mean, semis are about making your house look bigger, but our clients ask us to demarcate their line of ownership. They want it to look individual. So I think our culture and values have really changed since these houses were originally built. There's the section. It's an inverted section with the cellular bedrooms on the ground floor level and an open plan living space above, with this kind of incredible relationship with the sky and light. So there's our neighbour with their off-the-rack extension. And here we are, very clearly showing that compunction to individualise. In plan, the plan at the top of the screen shows the ground floor bathrooms, and you can't really see them, but stairs up to the pool at the back. There's internal stair leading to the first floor living spaces. Views to the east, sun and tree views to the north, and connection to the garden to the west. So there's that western garden connection. And you start to see that the first floor is treated as an ambiguous indoor-outdoor space. And the light coming through those highlight windows kind of dematerializes the line we've established with the ceiling joists here. There's the northern highlight window, looking back to the pool. And on the left-hand side, all the service zones are wedged against the party wall, which is a way of acoustically isolating two semis. There's the beautiful Robinia framed and filtered views, and looking back down the stairs in that service wall. So here's the kitchen in its pristine state of photography. Our client sent us some photos of the kids. What does life in COVID look like? Preparing food, eating food, games, learning. And here are the three kids homeschooling themselves. It's a full carpentry built house, which was an interesting part of the brief. It was built for a builder carpenter. So that idea of extending the language of the gable and the decorative language of the gable was also a response to a construction methodology. This is a house that's almost complete. It's a kind of a work in progress. It's in Mossman, looking north over Chinaman's Beach and over the street. This is the original house. Mossman Council is also terribly conservative, and this house had breaches of all setbacks and heights. So we picked some key points in space and devised a strategy around not moving those, which looks like this. So we ran a big band of concrete through the middle, made a little hut on top that houses all the bedrooms, and opened up below to north and to view and to the pool, the existing pool at the rear of the garden. And all of this sits on top of an existing garage wall and and garden wall. So that's what it looks like, almost finished. Bit of chip paint in that photo, but you can really see that we've elevated a piece of garden into the sky and put a little cute house on top. It's clad in charred timber, charred hardwood, which is really, it gets this exquisite quality in the sun, almost like velvet. It has a directionality. So it's used as cladding and as privacy screen there. The kitchen sits on the right on the threshold of inside and outside, so that you get this kind of relationship with the view. And the upstairs rooms are smaller with more precisely framed views and a really intimate character in comparison with the open plan of the ground floor. We had a lot of fun with steel detailing and that contrast between enclosed and open, solid, plain, and open and void. This next house is in Hunters Hill. It's been on site for a long time. It's a really complex alts and adds, a huge north-facing elevation, all facing onto that beautiful harbour view. So the concrete ceiling's just been stripped, and the light's starting to stream in through windows and circular skylights to the rear, and this will be the most beautiful circular stair one day. In Glebe, we're doing some work to a Victorian heritage house. It's really beautiful and beautifully built brick house. It has this beautiful archway here, and the existing construction of the house is actually glorious. We opened up that corridor and extended it, creating a courtyard to the north. This is another densification project with a secondary dwelling to the top and 2 opportunities to work from home. So it's really all about a lot of, this kind of predicts a COVID state where we'd have 2 work from home offices, but not much Airbnb rental, unfortunately. The new volume is made by kind of pulling off a version of the old roof so that the elevation in effect remains almost the same. And there it is, extending that archway form through the corridor from that front arch, opening up front to back. And that currently looks like that. This house is the amalgamation of 2 semi-detached dwellings in Paddington. We've honoured the symmetry of the plan in attaching these houses to one another and embedding a new bedroom floor in a sculpted roof space, ending in a gable at the back, so extruding that roof form back. That's what it looks like now. And one day it will be like this. In Dulwich Hill, this is another contributory item. It's a large house on a big block, and to the northeast of the block there's a nunnery with a beautiful established grove of eucalypts that is our view. Here's the existing house. It's a really, really quirky house. It looks like those columns and pilasters are wearing kind of rocky leg warmers to me. We've re-enclosed the back of the house and extended it slightly and added this new roof form with a low dormer and bedrooms embedded on that top floor looking out over the garden and into that eucalypt canopy. And it's got chunky little boots on its skinny legs as well. There they are on site. Side of that big gable. We're having some fun reinterpreting the decorative detailing of the original house. And the first floor is feeling like some kind of crazy installation art project with the acoustic gyprock in that great pink colour with the measles. Moving out of Sydney, we got to Avoca Beach now. This site's at the demolition stage. It's a giant site north facing right on Avoca Beach. You can see on either sides that the site's flanked by houses that occupy the whole site. We're doing that too, but we're punctuating the house with a series of courtyards. So garaging to the south, living room to the north, and courtyards in the middle. Then the first floor is really diminished in scale, like a whole lot of little vernacular beach houses have been dumped on top of a garden floating in the air or something like that. Looks like this from the street, using the modest vernacular of painted brickwork to build an immodest house. It's enormous. And here's our entry courtyard. That's a, sorry, I haven't credited, that's a Jamie North sculpture that the clients are going to buy for the house. The pool courtyard and looking through to the beach. And then this huge entertaining kitchen. So it's an interesting house. It's a house for multiple families to have big house parties. To the south of Sydney, this is now in Bundina, and this is a kind of companion house for that house, but much, much smaller. It's also a timber weatherboard courtyard house, but this one's 150 square meters. So a simple, affordable house built around a courtyard, enjoying a beautiful north-facing garden. A response to the vernacular with the, a lot of the houses in the area are weatherboard, rather curiously, with terracotta roofs. So we've introduced terracotta in the landscape and weatherboard on the house. And there it is looking back through the courtyard. In Coogee, on this enormous block, we're building a house for a really busy and active family of 4. It's in 2 pavilions, 2 little house-shaped pavilions. The northern one contains the adults' accommodation upstairs, and the southern one has the children's accommodation. The idea is to take the original bungalow shape and just hitch it up in the air on top of a layer of charred timber work. And our client is really interested in brickwork texture, and she wanted us to explore a flat elevation and a figured elevation. So this flat one talks to these beautiful quilts, real flatness and pattern making within the elevation. And then we've got this super Baroque one at the rear as the house opens up to the north and to the garden and to a beautiful tree view to the rear of the site. And there's our little family vignette, 4 kids, busy family. This is an image our client sent to me. I asked her how homeschool was going, and she said, would they have built this if school was on? I suspect not. And then from large houses, we go to small houses. This is a house for a couple who are currently living in New York with 2 kids, and they're in an apartment, and they can't wait to get home to the luxury of this enormous house. It's a terrace house, and we looked here for the opportunity to create space through this section of the house. So using the step down in the topography to actually squeeze 3 floors of accommodation in where there was previously only 1. We're going to demolish the existing brickwork to the rear and reconfigure it, concealing that section in an elevation that looks like 2 stories. Then in Bellevue Hill, we've got this beautiful large house. It's a heritage item. It's a really special house on a gorgeous site. We're putting a new basement level and pool in, which holds up an extension of the existing sleep out. So there was a sleep out built with the original house to the east, and we're just bending that language around to the north to create a new kitchen and living area, and a great big terraced bleacher basement piece connecting to the garden. And then on the top level, we're extending the language of the roof form to make a new master bedroom, kind of palatial dressing room, and then a little nook adjunct to one of the bedrooms that's a kind of slumber party and study nook. This is the front of the house. She's a kind of stately and dumpy old dame who in need of a makeover. And I find something so charming about this rear elevation, but we're going to do this to it. So really reinforcing that idea of enormous roof, recessive middle and strong occupied base. Here's the extended sleep out rooms, and this becomes a cooking space that's really attached to garden and outside, in a way that the original arts and crafts houses weren't. They were very inward looking. Client Glenn sent me a portrait of his homemade sourdough. So he's a very busy professional man, and he's using his house in a way he didn't think he would. Then we go back across the bridge to Mossman. This is the second last project I'll show. This is a house with north to the rear of the site and a view to the south and to the east. It's in a row of bungalows, like suite bungalows in gardens, that are all have been, well, I guess they did this to it. So it would have been a brick and tile house, and it got this done. So it's got a really strong street wall and some interesting form making and material language going on. We're going to, like the previous Mossman one, there are a few critical points in space we have to keep, but at the same time, we'll rebuild in brick without blocking anybody's view. So it's vastly enlarged, but it's still an enabling project. We push the garage back under the house and reinstate garden and wall-less garden to the front of the house on this important trip to Balmoral. This is another house where the ground floor has the bedrooms. So then the first floor can be opened through clerestory windows to the northern light above and to the view out to the left of your screen. So view to the south on the left, light to the right. And it connects down to a garden at the back. So there it is. Our clients don't like warm colours, which has been a real struggle for our team, which is quite interesting to know that we have a real bias towards warm colours. So we've been working within this really cool idiom, referring to Morandi's exquisite paintings and colour palettes and compositions, and working with this very cool restrained palette. So there are the highlight windows facing north and looking back to the south. And this is the last project I'll show. This is a house in Bronte. It has north and views in the same direction, but in this case, the garden's to the south of the site. There it is, it's elevated above the street, and the street to the south is actually 4 stories above the ground level of this house. So there's a huge site differential. Our strategy in plan is to push all the servant spaces of the house to the perimeter and clear out a bit of connective tissue that goes from view to garden seamlessly. So we've got these heavy brick sides and then a completely clear central room on the ground floor, and then moving upstairs, there's a void and some bedrooms. Pool to the back. The domestic ritual of our client is to come home, swim at Bronte, come home and grab a beer from the barbecue fridge and sit in the pool before engaging with the family. So a lot of work's gone into supporting that ritual. The garage is supported 4 floors in the air, so there's a kind of sculptural quality to how we create that void and turn the circulation up there into a kind of garden of its own. This is a very early render we did. We haven't updated it. The pool's actually on the other side. And Nathan and Eve, I'm pleased to say that it's now a brick building, which you can see in this more recent render. So that those heavy brick sides are expressed internally and externally. And this is what our client's daughter has been doing during COVID. No wall is safe. She's amazing. She's only 13, parrot on the shoulder, and doing these amazing paintings. So that's the end. In conclusion, I'm just going to show you a single shot of our LA clients quarantined on their return back from Venice. I think thinking about the house and the domestic makes me feel grateful to have had this time with my family. Certainly to have had an opportunity to ask people to reflect on their relationship with their family. I think to live in a country with good healthcare and dedicated healthcare workers. It makes me feel grateful for the homes we've had the privilege to design, and also to be housed ourselves. I think we've been talking about the housing of the privileged tonight, but I think it behoves all architects to start to think about the housing of the underprivileged if we do go into a deep recession. So there's been a lot of chat about changing our domestic ways in the future. I hope it's not at the expense of public or communal spaces of our cities, but I am really excited to see what the future of flexible work means and what that means for the domestic. Thank you.
Hannah, thank you so much. That was a phenomenal body of work that you shared with us. And if you'd also pass on our thanks to your clients for giving us those insights into how they're surviving. I think if I was residing in one of those light-filled, beautiful spaces that you designed, I'd also be feeling a little bit better about COVID. So, so thank you. We've had some great questions coming in. So for those watching, if you do have some questions, now's your opportunity. Hannah, if we go back to the first project that you presented, House O Young, forgive me if I didn't quite get that right, but Christina Markham's asked, at what point in the project do you consider materiality? So that brick unit, where do you integrate that into planning and design?
I think we normally think about materiality very early on. Certainly in odds and ads projects, we did, when we were younger, we did a lot of, here's the new house and here's the old house. And I feel like, you know, and you kind of practice doing miniaturized public buildings attached to little cottages. We don't do that with odds and ads anymore. We try to subjugate our own egos and channel the language of the original architect in a way that makes sense for contemporary construction. And in that tension between the two, there's so much opportunity. It's such a rich way to work. And we find that really engaging and fascinating. And those old houses, they're decorative. Their decoration is always about construction somehow. It's not often superfluous. I mean, Victorian houses are superfluously decorative. But there are a lot of areas of Australian construction where the decoration is inherent to the construction. And therefore, when we add on to those houses, material and construction are front of mind from the very beginning.
Interesting, because this question probably leads a bit with it, Hannah. Brenton Rashid has said, so are you essentially, do your clients request brick, for example? Obviously, a lot of brick projects. So are they requesting brick, or is it?
Yes.
You guys are, or your firm seen as, I don't know, maybe brick favourite and sort of.
Oh my gosh, that's music to my ears. Like 17 years ago, we did a white box house, and I felt like we'd only get to do white. Like everyone rang and they're like, "Oh, we love your white box. Can we have a white box?" And we did white boxes for 10 years. So I think you do one brick house and you're the brick lady. But I'm thrilled with that. I think people have come to us specifically for brick projects, which is great because we love working with brick. We do like to do whatever's suitable in the context. I mean, brick is this kind of foundation material of Sydney. So those brick and tile buildings, and as we demolish more of them, we lose the texture of place. And there's a lot of writing about feeling nostalgic for the city we once knew because the rate of change is too fast. And I think there's certainly a lot of yearning from our clients for tactility and sense of connection with place that I think they can equate very easily with brick. Thanks, Brenton. I don't know if that answers his question.
We had a comment from Angelo Perello, just thanking you for your presentation, Hannah. And I think Angelo also commented earlier that your projects are incredibly elegant. We have had a question about the use of parapets for some of the modern extensions and houses, and how you deal with box gutter issues through design. Are you able to avoid them?
That sounds hard.
Yeah, the question is around a new nuisance despite using gutter guard in bush areas. So do you have any comments on that?
Oh, if we're in a fire zone, we don't use them. we won't typically use them under a huge tree unless we have to, and otherwise it's just a maintenance issue, really. Yeah.
Another question came in about your renders and how beautiful they are,
Yeah.
and who you actually, is that for the client or for council or for your own review?
Client mainly. We've got some really just an incredibly talented team of architects here, and they all can build 3D models and render exquisitely. We use them for testing. We use them to provide options to clients. Yeah, they're all in-house though, all the residential ones. We only outsource big buildings. Yeah.
So there's a question I got to admit, it did catch my eye as well. The charred timber. What as a product where, you know, is that sort of an on-site thing that's done, or is it a custom?
You can do it on site, but you can also buy it. They kiln fire it, so it can have multiple charrings. So the more burnt it is, the more it's like a drawing willow stick and crumbly, or it can just have a light burn on it, and it's actually more durable. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to make any promises about building materials, but it's lower maintenance than. I mean, we don't use a lot of natural timber because the maintenance is a disaster on it. Externally, love it internally, but externally, I'm not a huge fan. But the charred timbers seems to hold up really well.
I think a final question's just come in regarding your experience with glass brick construction-wise. Do you have any comments on that?
Look, it's pretty gorgeous, right? The project architect on that job, Miriam Green, did some really great steel detailing to go with it, in collaboration with the terrific builder as well. I mean, they're just beautiful. In terms of construction, I don't think I would probably need a bit more of a specific question, but they are, the way the light refracts through them and reflects through them. And there's this weird thing when you look through a wall of them, you see that ashlar pattern, but you also see it on the other side. So it has it has an experience as you move past it. So they're a surprisingly beautiful material.
We might look to sort of leave it there, but I might share one more comment for Vanessa Sart. Thank you, Hannah, for your deep and considered contribution to Sydney architecture, for your celebration of materiality and light, and also inspiration to female architects with kids. So I think that's a really lovely place to leave it for tonight. And
thank you, Vanessa, and it's good to have friends like her in the industry. Thanks, Eve. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me. It's been an honour.
Well, thank you all for joining, and we look forward to the next event.